In this lecture, we're going to talk about eugenics. You've likely heard the term eugenics before and associated with atrocious practices that took place in Nazi Germany before and during the Second World War in the middle of the century that we've just left behind us, the 20th. Eugenics wasn't a German invention, however. Apparently the suggestion that we should improve the human race was first made by a British guy in the 19th century, a guy called Francis Galton, if that's how you pronounce his name. These practices became very popular in the United States, among other places, where sterilization took place of groups that other people didn't really like. And from there on, it moved over to Germany. But what does it actually mean to improve the human race? What is better? What does improving mean? In earlier lectures we saw that animals have some characteristics that we might think of as typical for human beings. In other words, reality is a little bit more complex than we tend to think. It's not either or, also called linear. Life occurs along a very broad range in almost all aspects. Different ways of being are not necessarily bad. Reality is rich, diverse. Reality includes a great deal of diversity as well as a great deal of overlap. Perhaps it's industrialization, the advent of mass production, that has led many people to believe that there is such a thing as an ideal human being, a standard human being, a standardized human being, an optimized human being. Normalization, assessing and comparing people according to a standard. Or does it have to do with the materialistic belief that a person can only be happy after having beaten someone else, in the sense of having a bigger house, a bigger car, a bigger boat, a bigger trampoline, a bigger pool, the latest iPhone? Consumerism. While the old eugenics hasn't even disappeared yet, we are now seeing the new eugenics. It's also called consumer eugenics, personal eugenics, private eugenics, liberal eugenics. It's about tweaking ourselves and notably our offspring. Tweaking ourselves isn't necessarily eugenics, because it isn't passed on. In dogs, the drive to create designer animals has led to animals who have many health problems and vulnerabilities, because that goes with the cute extra flat faces and the extra fluffy, extra wrinkly skin, or the 10 times longer hairs or longer ears. Why do we want to tweak dogs to make them look a certain way instead of letting dogs look the way dogs look? Is that a consumerist view? I think so. Similar considerations apply to tweaking our offspring. Designer babies. Some say that we will never have them because tweaking genes is pretty complicated. It's often oversimplified in the dialogue, but it's very complicated. It's not like you have one gene for one thing. It's not like, let's say, piano keys. But if you reject a baby because it has an extra chromosome, or fly to another country because you want a baby of a specific gender, isn't that also about designer babies? So aren't we already making designer babies? I want the blue handbag, not the pink one. What is parenthood then? Is it like iPhone ownership? Is it like matching accessories to the colors of your clothing or the style of your furniture? I want the blue handbag, not the pink one. I want the blue chair, not the pink one. An example? Some countries have almost completely eradicated the occurrence of Down syndrome. There are also countries in which there are now more people with Down syndrome, because we learn to see how our own bias and the resulting practices often stop people with Down syndrome from living life to the full. Sticking someone in an institution and isolating that person, instead of allowing him or her to experience life and develop, wow, that limits such a person extremely. If you'd stuck me in an institution at birth, I wouldn't be standing here right now talking to you. It's all that deprivation that causes a great deal of the so-called impairment. The emancipation of people with Down syndrome is only one of the many trends of emancipation the world is going through at the moment. I think that these are wonderful developments. Not that long ago, keep in mind, not that long ago, women too were severely hampered by society. We weren't allowed to go to university, we weren't allowed to own businesses, we weren't allowed to vote. And look how far we've come! And our emancipation hasn't finished yet. To go back to the new eugenics, I think that removing too much diversity from the human population could lead to the following: less creativity, no more solutions required, greater intolerance, obviously, and less what I call inclusive solidarity, resulting in societies that are less healthy and heck of a lot less fun to live in. Political philosopher Michael Sandel at Harvard Law School, he's one of my favorite philosophers by the way, has pointed this out numerous times, for example in The Case Against Perfection. Bioethicist Julian Savulescu at Oxford, he often argues for selecting what he calls the best children. But who decides what the best is, particularly in societies that have a great deal of inequality?
While I don't agree with many ideas put forward by Julian Savulescu, a bioethicist based at Oxford, he has given the world one brilliant idea. Why not distribute embryos randomly to people? I think it's a very good idea. It would foster inclusive solidarity and perhaps put an end to discrimination of all sorts. And we are seeing this in practice. Several snow babies, so-called snow babies, have been created. Frozen embryos, other people's frozen embryos that have been adopted by people who felt, why not take someone else's embryo and make it our baby? That's what we should strive for, perhaps.
Could there be less creativity in a world with only perfect people, like I just mentioned? Yes, I think so. Not only because people who are different can be much more creative than standard people, mainstream people. That's part of what makes them different. But also because less solutions are required to make everything work for as many people as possible. No more wheelchairs would be developed. No more wheelchairs for deep sea diving would be developed, like Sue Austen did, for example. By the way, have you seen the film The Stepford Wives? That's about standardized people. Yikes! In the assignments, we will look at what some people in society have to say about the idea of gene editing them out. We'll come back to details of the new eugenics in later lectures. What we won't do in this course is go into technical details of techniques like CRISPR, but I include links for those who want to know more. Well, that's it again. Here are the take-home points. The idea of improving the human race, eugenics, hasn't disappeared yet. It's not a Nazi thing. Now we also have the new eugenics, the idea of designing our offspring, making better babies, better human beings. Who determines what's better? The unbridled application of the new eugenics may make society less creative and harsher, with much less tolerance for people who are only a little bit different. That's a form of poverty. And as an afterthought, why do I think that it will be bad for society, or maybe bad for society? I think it would erode the principle of parental love, which is unconditional love. If you start seeing children as products, it changes something very fundamental in how society works. And I don't know what that might do to a society. Do you?